Welcome to the Red and Bulge Show. I am Mark Adams from 49ers Camelot, and I'm joined by my co-host, Anthony Robertson of 49ers Cutback. Ant, how's it going, my friend?
It's going well. Training camp has officially started, which means real football news is here. And that's exactly what we all want to talk about is actual football in the field, and that's what's actually happening now. So it's great. It's a good time. 49er fans are going to be going out to training camp, the 10 days that are going to be open, and there's going to be a lot of fun times. And I think that's what we're all looking forward to is that plus the fact that preseason football is just around the corner. So we are about to see real games here pretty soon. It's a great time. It's always exciting. It's like Christmas Eve. You get excited about what's going to come up. And I know a lot of people say that for the regular season, but I love training camp. I love preseason. I love watching backups. I've always been that way. And so that's why I'm excited.
That's cool. Josh is here in the chat with us. What's going on, Josh? Good to see you. I love that he calls me Mark the Great. he's the only one that's ever said that. So that makes Josh my new best friend. Well, let's jump in because this is about training camp news for the 49ers. And so let's jump in and we have plenty to talk about, plenty to see, plenty to hear. And so I want to start off with yesterday when Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch spoke. They made the announcement that Dre Greenlaw, Talanoa Hufanga, and Drake Jackson are all on the PUP list. That's physically unable to perform. They can come off of the PUP list at any point during training camp and I think preseason as well. But once the regular season starts, if they stay on PUP, once the regular season begins, I think they have to miss at least 4 games. So we want to get those guys healthy. Dre Greenlaw is probably not going to come off of it once the regular season starts. He's not going to be back until later in the season, but the other 2 should be able to come off. Ricky Pearsall is on the NFI list. That's non-football injury list with a hamstring injury. I think that it looks like he's going to miss these first 4 practices or so. And then the hope is that he'll be back next week. I think they'll take it slow with him because hamstring injuries can tend to linger for a while.
Yeah, it all depends on how bad it was. They haven't really said that it was a pull. They just said it was a hamstring. So it could have been a strain or something minor that you just want to be careful with. And we don't know exactly when it happened during the offseason either, but put him on NFI, make him miss the first block. That's not really crazy, these first 4 practices. And then see what he looks like in block 2. They'll be getting into pads, and that'll allow him to kind of integrate into the 49ers offense. I think that, as far as what they had said about it coming out that it was a minor injury, I think it is a minor injury as long as they're very careful with it. It's a long process still to get to games. No reason to rush him out there, like you said. I think when you look at the other guys that are on PUP, I think Drake Jackson and Dre Greenlaw are both going to end up on PUP into the season. I think it makes a lot of sense for Drake Jackson for them to ease him back and also then be able to carry him onto the active roster. So they got some real decisions to make as far as the roster goes. Greenlaw, we knew it was always going to be week 6 or beyond. So I think both those guys started the season on PUP. The question is going to be Talanoa Hufanga. We know that he wants to come back before week 1 of the regular season. At what point does he come to training camp? If it's, block 2, block 3, we get into the first preseason game and he comes back, realistic timetable for him to be back for week 1. We start getting out there into the end of August and he's not back, I'll start having concerns about him being ready for week 1. And the 49ers might have to make a decision before that. Because do we want, even though they're good, Jair Brown and possibly George Odom starting against Aaron Rodgers week 1. I love Jair. He's going to start anyways. But George Odom, I don't know. That makes me a little nervous. So decision time at some point. Hopefully it's just Hufanga comes back and then we don't have any worries. But I think that is a question mark right now with the guys that are injured.
Well, hopefully Aaron Rodgers is a little rusty, but don't count on it. That guy is probably still going to be really good. Another bit of news that we found out yesterday was that Kyle Shanahan reached out to Bill Belichick after he and the Patriots parted ways. Shanahan offered Belichick any kind of coaching job, I would assume, other than head coach for the 49ers, and Belichick politely declined. I don't think that's a surprise that he reached out to him, nor do I think it's a surprise that Belichick turned it down. I don't think that we would expect probably the most decorated coach in NFL history to leave that position that he's famous for and then go back to being a defensive coordinator or something like that. So that wasn't really a surprise.
No, it's not. But you got to respect the guts of Kyle Shanahan
Yeah.
to have the ability to make that call. And think about the thin line that you're kind of toying with there is you don't want to disrespect him, but you would love to add him to your coaching staff because you know what he could provide. And so, I give Kyle Shanahan props for making that phone call and giving it a try. And of course, Bill Belichick said no, but you don't know unless you ask. That's something my dad's told me for I don't know how many years of my life. So he gave it a try. It didn't work out. It would have been interesting to see the cutoff sleeves on the sidelines, walking around next to Kyle Shanahan. It could have been something special, but ultimately it didn't really seem like a real possibility. I know it was kind of talked about in the offseason, but now we know it was true. And it's interesting. And now we just, I guess, move on from the fact that didn't work out and we got Brandon Staley instead.
It's kind of like when Kyle or John Lynch reached out to Belichick and asked about Garoppolo, and at that time Belichick said no, and Lynch said, "Okay, what about Brady?" And so doesn't hurt to ask, and I kind of like you, I respect the guts to do that. Brandon Ayuk reported but did not practice. Here's what Kyle Shanahan said after practice today. He said that Brandon Ayuk's back and neck are sore, which was kind of news to hear. He said he's going to stay out of practice, which is obviously a hold in. It's what we expected. I understand the situation fully. So that was interesting, especially the part about Ayuk having some back and neck soreness. Don't know what that's from. Maybe it's just from working out. Maybe it's from being on an airplane. Who knows? Maybe slept funny, but they're certainly not in a situation yet because there hasn't been a new contract for Ayuk. And so hopefully they'll get something done soon.
Yeah. So actually yesterday I got an email from Lou. He always listens to the channel and he said, "Hey, what's up with this hold in? Brandon, are you going to hold in? How does he do that without getting fined?" And I told him, "Hey, this is what happens. They come in, they tell the trainers they're dealing with an injury. It's usually nothing significant, something they work on the side field. That's how you hold in without getting fined. So you manufacture some sort of thing that's nagging you or injured, and then that's how you get away with not having to pay $40,000 for not practicing." So it was always expected that he was going to come up with something if he's going to hold in. Me and you have talked about this, I think, a lot during the offseason, and I've been pretty consistent. I thought week one, for sure, he was not going to practice without a new contract, and that's exactly what he's doing. So no one be alarmed by the back or the neck. It's just a way for him to stay out of practice without getting fined. As Marshawn Lynch would say, "I'm just here so I don't get fined," and that's what Brandon Ayuk is doing right now. And at some point, hopefully they'll come to a good resolution, and then he'll get back on the field, and miraculously, all the neck pain, all the back pain will be gone, and he'll be ready to go.
Josh said, "I have a feeling he's playing on that fifth-year option." That is something that we really I think that you and I have assumed all along that they're going to get something worked out. When we had Matt Mayoko on, he was like, not so fast. Maybe they're not going to get this worked out. And so Josh might be right. He may be playing on the fifth-year option. How do you see that coming out?
I don't think that's what he wants. I don't ultimately think that's what the 49ers want. So I think they're still motivated to get something done. But I think it is realistic to think at some point that could be the conclusion that both parties have to come to. I don't know if something like Amari Cooper just did, where they give him a little bit more money, sweeten his pot, would satisfy him, where he gets a little bit more this season. And I don't know if the 49ers want to do that because of salary cap reasons, but they've got to come to some sort of agreement at some point, whether that's a contract extension or a fifth-year option. And I think fifth-year option is becoming a little bit more likely than it was, say, a couple months ago. because they have been in an impasse. And John Lynch's comments yesterday about the fact that it's been difficult, this exact negotiation, more difficult than they anticipated. They started earlier than they normally do and still couldn't get it done. To me, this is something that's on ahead to where it might be fifth-year option, and we might just have to readdress this next year when Ayuk gets franchised and potentially traded during the offseason. But I'm still hopeful that here in the next week or so, they're going to come to an agreement on a contract extension, and maybe we'll get the numbers that both sides feel comfortable with, and this will get done.
It is interesting. Somebody mentioned this earlier today, and I don't remember who it was, but they went back a year ago when Nick Bosa was a hold. I don't remember if he's a holdout or I don't think he showed up. I think he was a holdout, right? Do you remember?
Who was that?
Nick Bosa was.
Oh yeah, he held out the whole time.
Yeah, he wasn't in camp like Ayuk is right now. But on that first day, when John Lynch was asked about Nick Bosa, he said, "We're not trading Nick Bosa." But yesterday, he didn't come right out and say. He said, "We want Ayuk here," but he kind of suggested that maybe there's a chance. So who knows? I think everything's on the table at this point.
I think you have to let it be. Just with the way negotiations work, I don't think there's a realistic trade partner out there for the 49ers. Who's going to give up, a player that's the caliber the 49ers need for 2024? It's win now. Draft picks next year, potential first-round pick next year. That doesn't help the 49ers in 2024. Brandon Ayuk helps the 49ers in 2024.
Yeah.
And so this is the consistent conversation has been. It had to be a player like Devontae Adams or Terry McLaurin and somebody or something that was going to help get this team over the top. I don't think that's going to be out there. I don't think there's a trade partner for the 49ers. I think John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan are smart for leaving that door open, and they're going to probably do that with every single player from now on, just to make sure that if something comes up, they have the wiggle room. But I don't think it's legitimate that Ayuk would be traded at this point.
Yeah, I don't either. I think that would be a massive mistake. Speaking of holdouts, there was one guy. So Brandon Ayuk is holding in, but there's another player holding out. And it just happens to be the 49ers' best player. Now, some might argue Christian McCaffrey is the best player on the team. Some might argue that Nick Bosa is the best player. For me, it's Trent Williams, and Kyle Shanahan confirmed afterward that Trent Williams is not here, that it is a contract issue, and that they're working on it and that they're hoping to get something done. But did you expect to see Trent Williams holding out?
No, I mean, kudos to you. You brought this up, I think, over a month ago, that you thought Trent Williams potentially could be wanting more money or more guaranteed money on his contract. And we talked about this, and I just felt that they would have gotten something done. Trent, the relationship he has with Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch and the way they've worked together before, that this wasn't something that was going to surprise the 49ers, that Trent Williams would potentially want more money once his guaranteed money had ran out. But it sounds like Kyle Shanahan expected Trent Williams to show up, to be involved, and then in good faith, they were going to work on something. And Trent's taking it into his own hands. So even though I wasn't expecting it, I think that this is still something that I'm not as concerned about. They can get worked out, because ultimately getting a new contract for Trent Williams could definitely help them salary cap wise earlier. And then later, of course it would hit, but he's a guy who's expressed interest in playing till he's 40. That's 4 more years. He has 3 years left on his deal. They could rework his deal and give him some more guaranteed money and free up some cap space. It could be a win-win, but numbers always have to make sense. Penei Sewell's making about $28 million per year. That's the highest paid. That's probably where he's going to want to be. And right now he's going to make $20 million this year. So pay raise plus guaranteed money, I think, is going to be what Trent wants.
And Kyle did say something to the effect of, it's not going to hurt Trent Williams to miss a few practices. So hopefully he only misses a few. But even if he missed multiple, if he missed a couple of weeks, I'm not worried about Trent Williams. So he's going to be good for the 49ers. Did you see the interview that Kay Adams had with Diamador Lenore?
I saw just a little bit of it. I did not get to watch the whole thing, but I saw bits and pieces of it.
So there were two things that were interesting. First was that his smoke detector was beeping in the background, which was funny because it was annoying Kay. She was bothered by it, and she asked him about it, and he said that it's been like that for months, maybe even for a year. I think it may have been this time last year, that he's really superstitious, and things have gone so well for him that he won't change the battery. I thought that was pretty funny. But the other thing was that he mentioned something that it sounded like he was talking about contract negotiations going on right now with the 49ers. So I think that that's great news, because I'd love to see them extend Diamador Lenore and Charvarius Ward. I'm not sure if they can do both of them, but at least get one of them tied up for the future.
Yeah, I think the Charvarius Ward just got a lot more difficult with the new contract that Campbell got from the Jacksonville Jaguars. I think that contract kind of blew everything out of the water. And so I think Charvarius Ward's asking price just went significantly up. So unless they've had real steady talks with Charvarius Ward already, I wouldn't be shocked if he doesn't try to test free agency or at least want a pay raise over what got offered there. I think with Diamador Lenore, there's still a potential where he's affordable. And the fact that he can play inside and out makes him versatile. And so I think the 49ers definitely want to get Diamador Lenore done. I would expect Diamador Lenore to get done before the season starts. I think they're going to keep negotiating and working on a contract because they think he's a key cog to this team. And they know that even if Charvarius Ward moves on, and they don't want that, trust me, they want Charvarius Ward. He's a great player. But if he does, you have young players in Wake. You have other players that you can grab that you can put in there. So to me, I think that this is a situation where Lenore gets done at some point. And I think they're going to try to work out some contracts that are going to get done over the next 4 or 5 weeks to potentially set up next year and how they're ready to go when free agency hits and they have some big decisions to make.
Yeah, I would love to see them, like Josh said, love to see them extend him. But Diamador, change that battery. We don't need you dying in a fire or anything. We want you to be healthy and want you to be around. So let's get into some things that we saw or heard from the training camp reports from day one. Leonard Floyd, you texted me that he left the field with what was it, a possible hamstring or
it was a calf.
A calf.
Yeah.
I did see from Eric Branch that he came back to practice, so that's good news. We don't want him missing any time, but it kind of shows. I mean, when you sent me that text, my first response was, "Dang, that's not what we need to see," because that position, there's just outside of Bosa and Floyd, there's just not a lot of proven success there.
Yeah, I mean, your first thought when that happens is, oh my goodness, we're going to have to go see what's out there on the open market. And there's not a lot out there because, I mean, look what happened to the Dolphins. They're bringing in a player off the scrap heap because they had a player retire. So there's really not a lot of players out there that you can add. The good thing is likely this is a cramp situation because you're out there for the first time in practice. Maybe you haven't hydrated the way you thought you did. And this comes up. But, yeah, you have question marks about depth. I think Gross Matos is solid, but I don't know what we're going to get from Robert Beal. I don't know when Drake Jackson's going to actually come back. So I've floated around the idea of there being some players out there available that maybe you bring in that are veterans that have showed ability before. A guy like Carl Lawson, who was with the New York Jets over the last few years, who has the ability to be a double-digit sack guy when he has the chance. So at some point, depending on how things are going, I wouldn't be surprised to see the 49ers bring in a veteran player and just give him a try at a workout. I know they got Austin Bryant. I know they got guys like that. But to me, if Robert Beal is up to snuff, I think we feel a lot more comfortable. But after that, you're a little bit concerned, especially with Drake still being on PUP.
Yeah. Also, Demetrius Flanagan-Fowles limped off the field. Isaac Guerrero left the field, possible hamstring strain. And so I'm kind of on board with what Josh said. This isn't a good start for a rookie running back in a loaded running back room. How many times have we seen rookies? I mean, this was a concern about Ricky Pearsall. How many times have we seen rookies, even ones that were drafted highly, come in, get hurt early, and get so far behind that their rookie year ends up being kind of a wash. So we need these guys to get healthy soon. I did not like hearing this.
It's never a good thing. Soft tissue injuries are to be expected because these guys are coming in and they're putting their bodies through a little bit of different experiences. For some of the young guys, I mean, they've been working with the 49ers over the last week trying to prevent this exact thing from happening. Garindo has had a history of having hamstring issues that have cost him to miss football games in college. So it's unfortunate that we have an injury like this come up. I think the hope is that at some point he's able to come back during the preseason and get snaps. If he's not, he could be a player that's up to be redshirted, especially if you get really good play from Cody Schrader. All of a sudden, it might not be a bad idea to just put him on the shelf, but it also might be necessary so you don't lose the rights to him. So 49ers, we'll see where it goes. If he's back in 2 weeks, well, this will be a different conversation. But if this is something that's really bad that's going to linger, you're right. This could affect his ability in his rookie season to even be available for the 49ers, but also could put him behind enough that they think it's best just to rest him and see what he could do next year. I'm hoping not. I want to see what he can do, but it gets a little sketchy with hamstring injuries.
I saw some camp highlights from Larry Krueger that I wanted to go through. Some of these were interesting. He wrote that Malik Mustafa had a savage interception. I don't know what a savage interception is, but he had a savage interception on a deep ball from Josh Dobbs to Danny Gray. Easily the play of the day. That's cool to hear, especially since we already talked about Talanoa Hufanga possibly not being ready by week 1, depending on how he progresses from that knee injury.
Yeah, Kyle Shanahan talked about this play in his presser, and he talked about the fact that Malik Mustafa made a great play going from the deep third and being able to cover that ground to get to that deep ball. He actually thought it was going to be a home run shot to Danny Gray. Danny Gray did a good job getting over the top and where he was supposed to be. He said he wanted to go back and watch and see if the quarterback looked off Malik Mustafa or if he was staring down the receiver. If he's staring down, that helps Malik Mustafa get there. If he looked him off and he still got there, then that's the elite kind of makeup speed and ability that you're looking for from a safety, that cover, the ability to cover the deep third like that. That's tremendous. So, yeah, it's good news to hear Malik Mustafa's doing that early on. Now, I always want to pump the brakes with, he made an interception, so he's great. But I do like seeing young players make plays, but I'm less about results, and I'm more about being in the right spot at the right time. In this case, he was. So I love it from Malik Mustafa, and I hope we see more of that because 49ers do have question marks when it comes to depth at safety, and I would feel a lot more comfortable if Mustafa is kind of impressing us in camp the way that Jair did last year.
Yeah. Speaking of Danny Gray, sounds like he looked pretty good today, making some catches. So that's good news, especially because with his situation with a loaded wide receiver room, his days could be numbered. I mean, that was one of the things that Matt Maiocco said, that he thinks Danny Gray's days are done. I'm not ready to go that far, but I do think that he's kind of hanging by a thread along with Ronnie Bell. So I loved hearing that Danny Gray had a big play.
Yeah, I think one of the misconceptions about Danny Gray has been that he's just a vertical threat. And that's not the case. You go back and you watch his film, even at SMU, and the guy made a killing on plays over the middle, dig routes. That's a staple in Kyle Shanahan's offense, getting that ball over the middle and running it to the house. And he's got house call potential. Danny Gray had a very good training camp last year. Those that weren't there weren't able to see it. He never got to showcase it in preseason. So I don't blame fans for being down on Danny Gray. They didn't get to see it. But I did, and I thought Danny Gray looked really good last year. I think he would have made an impact last year for the 49ers team. And so, yeah, I've been kind of expecting him to come up and make some plays. And like I kind of floated last week, with no Ricky Pearsall, with no Brandon Ayuk, means your starting X right now is Danny Gray. That means more opportunities. And he was catching the ball. He was making people miss from some of the stuff that I saw today. And once I get out there, I'll be able to see him as well. So exciting news, because everyone should want to have an electric player like Danny Gray on their roster who can catch a 5-yard slant and next thing go 80 yards for a touchdown. That's that's huge for your team. And you throw in Cowing with that, and you got that speed to go vertical with two guys. Oh, you got to love that kind of speed being added to this 49ers offense.
Kenny said, I swear Matt Mayoko said Malik was not ready. I have not heard him say that, but he may have questioned, is he ready to start from day one? So that is possible, but I haven't heard anybody say that he's not ready. It's at this point with rookies, you just don't know. Some of them, the cream rises to the top in time, and some of them are going to be ready right out of the gate, and some of them it's going to take a little time. So we'll have to see where he's at. Looks like, and then Kenny said, Matt said that Harris was ahead of him. Yes, he did say that. That was I think you asked Matt the question, what happens if Hufanga's not ready? And he actually predicted if Hufanga's just a couple of weeks out, then he predicted George Odom would be the guy rather than them going out and getting someone like Justin Simmons. But he did mention the same thing. He mentioned Harris. I do remember him saying Eric Harris's name. So yeah, that was what he's talking about. Jackson hurt again. Yes, Drake Jackson had a knee injury. I think did he have surgery on that earlier in the offseason?
Yeah, he had surgery on a torn meniscus, and he's been recovering from that. It's actually the same injury that he had during the season. So this is just continuation of, but it seems like it was a pretty significant surgery. And I know they're really trying to ease him back. And I think that's smart, taking care of him, but also it has roster implications as well. So just be patient with Drake Jackson, and when you need him, he'll be available.
Yeah. So let's see. What else did Larry Krueger say? Patrick Taylor, JP Mason, Cody Schrader all had nice runs. But again, there's no tackling going on. So I think it's hard to evaluate linemen right now. And I think it's hard to evaluate running backs at this point in training camp.
Yeah, when you're evaluating offensive linemen right now, it's pretty ridiculous because they have no pads. Defenders have no pads. And also, you don't know exactly what they're doing as far as install and what they're asking these players to do. But when it comes to running backs, it's less about what happens in the run. Like, oh, they got 15 yards. That doesn't make it a good run. Did he read the right hole? Did he get his foot in the ground and get vertical? Did he use his eyes in the right way? Did he squeeze through the hole he should have, or did he try to stretch it out when he shouldn't? Those are the things that you should be evaluating. Footwork, vision, his ability in the open field, not so much results. Don't care about 10 yards, 15 yards, don't care. He could have got a 15-yard gain going outside, and Bobby Turner absolutely rips him because he missed the hole up the middle, because guess what? Outside won't be there when we get week one. So those are things that doesn't matter. When you're evaluating, it's got to be the other things.
Let's see. Lou said, guys, I'm late. Is BA officially holding in? Yes, he is. And Trent Williams is officially holding out. So those were two of the holding, which crazy. This is the first time in a year that Trent Williams has been called for holding. Just worked that in real nice. We were talking safeties, and Kenny said definitely can't count out anyone with the name Hawkins. Yeah, they did have what's
Taylor
his
Hawkins.
first? Taylor Hawkins. He started a game last year, and didn't do too bad. Let's see. Ant is preaching Niner Sickness podcast says, bring it. And then Lou said, Ant, we discussed this hold in, but BA isn't hurt, so he is being a detriment to the team, and as such, subject to a fine of $40,000 per training camp day and $733,330 whatever per preseason game. Send him home. Actually, since he showed up, he's not subject to that $40,000 fine. So he's good. Now Trent Williams is subject to a $50,000 fine,
right,
because he's holding out. So we'll see how that all goes. And Rob said, "Throw the flag on that Trent Holding joke." Come on, man. That was one of my best ones, and it just came to me. Here's another Larry Krueger thing. Jacob Cowing is going to be an instant impact vertical threat wide receiver. Exciting to see. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, Jacob Cowing got the speed. So against air, he's going to look absolutely fantastic. And, I hope the best for guys like Jacob Cowing and Danny Gray, who's got these vertical, threats and the speed. They're going to look lightning quick. What's going to be the key is when we get into practices with pads and they start getting checked, they start getting physically touched, and not just at the line of scrimmage, but as they're going over the middle, and all of a sudden the safety creeps down on them or a linebacker checks them. How do they get through those body checks? How do they work through the traffic? That's going to be one of the keys. I think he's going to be able to handle it. It's just one of those things where we have to see it. And I think we saw enough at Arizona that you're excited about him. But I want to see what happens when he's asked to go over the middle and he has to take a shot, or Fred Warner redirects him and gets him off his line on a route. How does he recover? Can he restack that route? Those are things that I want to see that there's no way you can see in day one of practice. But the fact that you can see his speed on the field and see that he has dynamic ability, yeah, I think that's something that everyone could recognize, and that's something good for Jacob Cowing and the 49ers.
Yeah, it'd be great if he can become that vertical threat or that speed threat that they've been wanting. And I like what you said earlier. If somehow Danny Gray makes this team and Jacob Cowing is on the field, if they could get those two guys on the field at the same time, man, that could be dynamic. Don't know that it'll happen, but we can dream, because I still remember those Rams teams, the greatest show on turf, when they had Isaac Bruce and Torrey Holt and who was that third one?
Aziz, right?
Akeem. Akeem.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it was. Yeah,
I can't remember his name, but I distinctly remember one play where I think Akeem caught the ball and ran like a long. It was a long touchdown play, and the only player near him was Torrey Holt, who was running right beside him, and they're talking to each other as they're running toward the end zone, and just thinking, man. Then you add in Marshall Faulk, and that team was just really dangerous. Love for the 49ers to come up with something like that, but it's hard to replicate what that Rams team had. Let's see. Last thing that Larry wrote was that Jalen Graham looks athletic and made a few plays. Also saw reports that D. Winters looked really good. Kyle Shanahan had some good things to say about D. Winters, that he had a really good offseason. So some positive comments there on the two young 49ers linebackers.
Yeah, I thought Kyle Shanahan's thoughts on D. Winters were very, very good. I mean, he said that he was basically cloning himself after Dre Greenlaw and Fred Warner. To me, that's a compliment in itself. He's taking care of his body. He's doing the things that they do. And I think that's what Fred Warner was kind of saying during the offseason. And now that you've get Fred Warner saying that and Kyle Shanahan saying that, I think we know right now that D. Winters is in the game to be one of those starting three linebackers. I think that's huge. And then when it comes to Jalen Graham, I think Jalen Graham looked really good last year in training camp. I think he was good against the run, struggled a little bit against the pass and some of his drops, which was interesting because he's a former safety. But they've got two young guys that are going to be out there competing, and I think it's going to be fun. When it comes to linebackers, though, once again, just like with some of the other positions, it's tough to evaluate linebackers when there's no pads on. Just knowing that they're going to get in the right locations with their fits, be able to step into the right gaps, go through the open windows. There's a lot still that needs to be determined. I think we'll find out more when they get the pads on. But for guys like Winters and guys like Graham, they're really going to be able to showcase that in the practices, joint practice with the Saints, and also during preseason. That's where they're going to be able to make their money.
Lou asked a question. I think he's talking about Ayuk. Why can't they discipline him? I think it's tricky with the Players Association. Just the way that things are structured, it's hard for the team. Now, with Bosa last year, there was talk, can they fine him? Can they not fine him? I think they could, but they didn't, since he was holding out. But in some cases, they're not allowed to not fine the player. I'm a little fuzzy on those situations. Like why were they able to not fine Bosa, but they can fine somebody else? In the case of Trent Williams, he's not on his rookie deal anymore. So I think that they don't have a choice but to fine him. But don't quote me on that. Do you know the differences in those rules?
Yeah, there are some different rules when it comes to fines of players on fifth-year options. And so that's why Nick Bosa wasn't fined last year. They could forgive his fine. So when it comes to Brandon Ayuk, basically with him doing the hold in, he eliminates some of the conversation about the fine in general. And then he just had to say that his neck and his back were sore. And those things get him on the list. He's going to be working with the trainer now. And now he doesn't have to pay the fines. The team knows what he's doing. He knows what he's doing, and they're okay with it. They know right now that's what's going to happen. At some point, though, they will tell him, look, you've been cleared. You need to be on the field. If you're not, then we're going to have to start, engaging these fines. But early on, everyone knows this is the tactic. Everyone knew this was the outcome, and that's what's happening.
Yeah, it's a little fuzzy on that stuff sometimes. But did anything that jumped out to you that you saw or heard that we haven't discussed so far?
Not really. I think that when it comes to day one of training camp, it's really a filling out process. So everyone understands when they're in block one like this, number one, they're trying to get the players acclimated to football again. Number two, they're starting to run their install. These are their base plays on offense and defense, their base scheme. Everything is real vanilla. They're not out there. Their job is not to win. So their job is not to stop the run if you're on defense. Their job is not to stop every single pass. Their job is to be in the right places. They're not expected to make tackles. That's not any of it. They just want to know their responsibility, get to where they're supposed to get, and that's it. And so right now, yes, I love hearing the good remarks about certain players stepping up and making plays, and that's wonderful. But as long as they get to the right spots, even if they don't finish the play, coaches are going to be happy. So this is a filling out process. That's why they're practicing for 4 straight days. They're really going to ramp this thing up. And so it's going to be a lot of fun. But once we get into pads, that's when we'll see a little bit more of the competition pick up. Then results matter a little bit more. But right now, it's definitely the basics for this 49ers football team.
Did you see what Aqib Talib said? He was on with Kay Adams.
Yeah, I saw you shared it on X, so I went ahead and watched that clip. And I missed it the first time about Brock Purdy, but I picked it up. I watched it again and picked it up the second time. That was interesting. What did you think about that?
Well, so if you didn't hear it, he said that Brandon Ayuk is a top 3 receiver in the league. And he said that Brock Purdy is not a real quarterback. Basically, he said if Brandon Ayuk ever gets a real quarterback, then he's really going to break out and do great things. So I didn't have I disagree with his statement that Brandon Ayuk is a top 3 quarterback. But if he thinks Brandon Ayuk is a top 3 not quarterback, wide receiver, if he thinks that Ayuk is a top 3 wide receiver, that's fine. But I just thought it was ridiculous that he said if he ever gets a real quarterback. I just say, are you not watching the games? I mean, statistics aside, and he said, I don't look at the stats. Well, obviously you don't look at the games either, because Brock Purdy, until that Ravens game on Christmas Eve, was the leader in the league for NFL MVP. And so, yeah, he had a terrible game and ended up losing that race, but he still was the leading passer in the NFL, leader in QBR, whatever that means. He broke the 49ers passing record for most yards in a season. I'll remind you, they've had guys named Montana, Young, Garcia, who have played for this team. And so I just think that what Brock Purdy did last year was really impressive, especially when he didn't have an off season to learn more about his position and fine tune his craft. He was recovering from that UCL tear. And so for me, he is a real quarterback. Now, is he going to be someday one of the top 5? Who knows? But to me, he belongs in the top 10. And I just thought it was ridiculous to suggest that Brock Purdy's not a real quarterback.
Yeah, this is the part where people can't get past the fact that he's not 6'5". He's not 230 pounds. He doesn't have a laser rocket arm that can make every single throw on the field. That he doesn't outrun every single player that tries to get him in the pocket. And they don't see that quarterback play is more nuanced than that. You can be the most talented individual in the world and not be a good quarterback, or not be as good a quarterback as Brock Purdy. Brock Purdy is a very solid quarterback, and he's a top 10 quarterback, which means he's a real quarterback in the NFL. And I think he's going to continue to build on his resume that he's already put forth in his first year and a half. And I think these things are going to become more and more ludicrous and ridiculous as far as statements. You can't take this stuff serious because he is a real quarterback. And the same people that criticize Brock Purdy will praise a guy like Geno Smith, who has done less in his long career than Brock Purdy's done in his first year and a half as a starting quarterback in the NFL. So to me, these kinds of things, they make these statements. They have no real basis for the statements. Little subtle jabs at Brock Purdy. And you know what Brock Purdy's going to do? He's going to play really well, and he's going to capitalize on his opportunities, get this team back to the playoffs where they want to be. And then next year, he's going to get paid like a real quarterback when he gets over $55 million in a new contract. So to me, this is going to be proven by Brock Purdy and his teammates. And you just can't play the way that he played in the NFL if you're not a real quarterback.
Like what Rob said, guy taking shots at Purdy actually shot himself for real. I think that's great. That's the comment of the day right there. Hey, that's all that I have. Do you have anything else to add?
Yeah, I think that this whole thing is going to work itself out with Brandon Ayuk. Eventually, he's going to get out to practice. I know it's frustrating. The same way it's a little bit frustrating, I'm sure, for some people that Trent Williams isn't there. But look at it this way: Trent Williams didn't practice a single Wednesday the entire season last year, and he did a pretty good job. So missing the first Wednesday of the year, I'm not going to complain about it. Christian McCaffrey didn't practice either. Veterans are supposed to get these kinds of things. It'll be just fine. The good news is Jalen Moore is going to get a lot of reps at left tackle during the offseason, and that's good. Jalen Moore continues to get better. All these things are going to get worked out. And then when you're paying attention to reports, it's take the things that you like, and have an enjoyment listening to some of the great things that are going to happen at training camp. But remember that it's more nuanced than just the results. It's not about stats in training camp. It's about them being in the right spots at the right time. And I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to getting out there, and I'm getting out there on Friday. So Mark, next week we can talk about what I saw live, what I saw in action. It's going to be a lot of fun. And by the next time we talk, I think they're going to be in pads. So that's good news.
Yeah, that's great. That's going to be a lot of fun. Josh asked if we're doing live games this year. That's something that we're still talking about. We did live games for the PSF app last season, and so we need to work out some things. We may hold out for more money. We'll see. we want a new contract.
Right now, I'm holding out. Yeah, I'm the Trent Williams of the PSF app. I'm holding out.
Yeah, that's I may hold in so I don't get fined. We'll see. Hey, thanks everybody for watching, and especially for those that were in the chat with us. It was a lot of fun. We'll see you next Wednesday. Hopefully we'll have a lot more to talk about. Hopefully some great news with contracts and young players that we're keeping an eye on.